Okay, like to call to order our regular council meeting for October 9th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Want to call the roll?
Shaw.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Conan.
Here.
Adair. Here. I gotta fill you in there. Belkey.
Here.
Sleds.
Here.
And Ballard is absent.
Yeah.
We got no motions on today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, somebody better stand.
So,
We'll be waiting for a long time.
you've had a chance to review the agenda. Would somebody,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
motion by Shaw, supported by Clark. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's approved.
We need to put asterisks next to all the motions since Lyle's in here.
Are there any citizens' comments?
I'm just here about the approval for the permit.
She's got a special event coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, that's in our consent agenda, so, okay.
Can everybody sign in too, please, if you haven't? Stacy, can you pass the sign-in sheet back? I don't think you said
already
sign
signed
it.
it.
I thought it
Thank you.
Okay, there's no presentations tonight, so administrative reports. Administrators, who would like to go first? Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, for the police action report for September, traffic tickets issued were 18. Drove while licenses suspended, there was 1. Assisted the Armada Township Fire Department inside the village 7 times. Assisted other agencies 7 times. Armada County Sheriff in Armada Township. Civil dispute, there was 1. Dog or animal complaint, there were 2. Juvenile related complaints, there were 3. Mental distress situation, we had 1. Miscellaneous calls for service, there were 13. Theft, we had 1. Retail fraud, we had 1. As of September 30th, 2023, the miles on patrol car 431 are 91,626. 432, the F-150 has 29,800. The 433 is the unmarked Dodge, it has 63,536. The state of Michigan is requiring all police officers to attend an 8-hour of active shooter training by January 1st, 2025. 7 Armada officers had the training on September 30th at the Armada Middle School. Also in attendance was Memphis and Richmond officers. There will be another training day December 2nd, 2023 at Richmond High School. There were 2 assault reports taken at the Armada Fairgrounds. Both cases closed out with an adult warrant and a juvenile petition obtained. So on the second training in December, he's requested to have it taped. So it'll be broke up a little differently. We couldn't tape the one on the 30th because an 8-hour class, you got a camera sitting there for 8 hours. Who's in what, but. So that'll do it.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any other reports? Steve, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Ross?
Feel like I've blown up the balloon and now it's gonna let the air back out. We had talked for the last several months about the water tower cleaning and needing the VFW variable frequency drive pump unit for well house number 7. Can't come up with a good delivery date for that VFD, and I do not want to take the water tower down without it. So it went from last week, was supposed to be here, to January. Now it's late November. I don't know when it's going to show up.
So
I have talked to Veolia, who is our water tower maintenance company and asked to move the maintenance to spring, which they've been able to do. And so gonna hold off on the tower. When the VFD does show up, whenever it shows up, I do want to get that.
Why do we have to have the VFD?
Because the tower is what normally pressurizes.
But
the
we never
system.
had one before, did we? Or what did we do before?
When we took the tower down for maintenance, well, the pumps run all the time continuously because there's no water in the tower. So whenever there is demand on the system for water, the pumps are gonna run. And this is an old drive on number 7. We talked about this late last year. In fact, that was one of the first things that we did when we passed the budget, is we bought this thing. But as a lot of equipment is nowadays, it's long lead time to get parts in, and this has got chips in it. And so it's not here yet, and I don't want to risk that pump failing when the water tower is
You
empty.
don't want the big pump to be overloaded there.
Yeah, that would not be a good thing.
Okay.
We're just gonna move it 5 to 6 months to the right, and whenever that VFD comes in, UIS SCADA, who we bought it
That
from.
monitors the pump?
Well, I don't wanna give a technical presentation here, but our concern is the pump on number 7 will fail, because it's an old pump. So we wanted to have this new drive installed in well number 7, so that we limited the risk of having a failure,
Okay.
right? When the water tower is empty and the pumps are running, continuously in many cases. Now we've got 3 wells, and we rotate the pumps, but they're gonna be high demand on those pumps for the week that the water tower's down. So, not an issue to move the water tower, there's no cost to doing that, it's just scheduling. But I would have liked to have gotten it done this year, but we needed that pump in first, the variable frequency drive. So I'm gonna move that, unless miraculously this thing shows up tomorrow, and we get it installed, then I can maybe call the tower company back up and have them do the maintenance the first week in November as we had planned. So, but I doubt that's going to happen. I think everybody knows that Dave Wagner is going to be out for a couple of weeks. He's got some vacation time. He's got some surgery. We've got one of our DPW employees leaving. I have talked to Catherine Wynn, who's the F&V regional manager, and just about to determine whether or not they'd be willing to oversee the DPW crew, both, you know more than I do, Dan Blue.
Yeah, we've been talking about this also. But,
Okay, great, all right.
So,
It's just that they
what
will.
Dave's got, he's got 2 weeks and one of the weeks he's out of town, 1 week he's still in town.
He's in town, so.
But when he's got the
Surgery, shoulder.
surgery, he's gonna be laid up for a little while.
Yeah.
That's not till November.
No, but that's
Yeah.
right, it's in November.
Yeah, both Dan and Mike Glasgow, who's the water treatment plant operator in charge, have been former DPW superintendents, and so they're just gonna chip in, there's no extra cost.
Kinda maybe help schedule the
Just
guys.
manage, a little management oversight.
Then they also will need to have the list of emergency contacts. We
Yeah.
do have a list, if they're, if we have certain problems that the guys here can't handle. Because,
Sounds like you guys are on top of it. So-
well,
and,
no, I appreciate you talking to them and, we're on top of it, but we're not resolved with this, so.
No, for sure.
We gotta be ready.
And you said no additional costs?
No additional cost. For you, it's, because Dan's here for his 8-hour shift, I've got 20 hours that Mike Glasgow works here, and so he will chip in up to his 20 hours.
Yeah,
If-
well,
if
some of
needed.
if there's extra work that probably would not come out of either one of your budgets, would it? And when they come out of the general fund, if we have somebody helping out?
That or the DPW.
I would think it would come out of the general, but it
Yeah.
would be out of
Which is
scope.
Yeah,
Right,
so-
it's an out of scope charge.
Yeah,
Uh,
but
But
just
Kathleen,
good we got some
I think
money
it
in that
depends
general
on
fund.
where-
yeah.
That's why we got money in that general
Yeah.
fund.
I don't anticipate any issues, and it's good to have some backup if,
Oh, yeah,
Curtis
we
or
want to
Tommy,
be ready,
you know,
and,
say
So-
they need some help, so.
okay.
And then the last thing I got is, we had, planned to have a SEMCOG briefing on the 23rd of October at 6 o'clock. I'd like to move that to 13 November. SEMCOG's got quarterly General Assembly meetings, and there's one coming up on the 26th of October. And of course, their topic is kind of germane to what the briefing.
I don't think anybody has a problem moving it out further.
I didn't see anybody jumping up.
No.
So, Michelle, I'm just gonna
Yep.
move it to the 13th of November. at
13th.
Well, since we're
And
on the,
that's all I have.
the DPW, we do have an opening, so if anybody's interested, call the office, put in a resume, put in an application, we're looking, so.
So Dave, I've got, so
Thank you.
Michelle hit one.
So
of the
Chris,
points.
you got something for
Yeah,
us?
Michelle hit one, but in terms of looking, as our recruiting, we've got, always looking for more. We have a couple applicants to talk to right now and go from there. Got the water main break that happened over on Franklin and Holloway. Repair is, we got it patched right now, the pipes
Saw
all
that
over.
across there.
It's the blacktop, right, so we're scheduling the blacktop replacement here. But that's about $3,000 in materials and labor, so
Now, our guys fix it?
not a spot that big.
We had
No.
12 by
telecom
30.
system,
Yeah.
tractor truck, and,
So,
Okay.
Michelle, we talked again here before, Act 51, we gotta do a little bit of updating. Act 51 submitted there's an investment reporting tool. We just have to go in and say what projects, if any, we had, and if it's zero, it's still, you just have to tell them it's zero. So we'll take care of that upcoming here. Thank you. And the upcoming, we have our kickoff meeting on the Lathrop Street project on Thursday. And at that point in time, I'll get the letter draft for all the residents, when that starts and what to expect in terms of the schedule, parking, things like that, so.
Still think we're gonna get it in this year?
Absolutely.
All right, good.
Yep, it's the delay, it's from the time now, it's, basically their schedule date's a week off of what we were looking for. But I was pulling that schedule in pretty tight, early. So we got one for it.
Weather's changing.
It is, but
Yeah.
early November is their completion.
Sounds good. Does that cover you?
That covers me, thanks.
Okay, so, that
Plan-
covers,
Planning
Mike, you got
Commission.
something? Yes.
You guys have the minutes in front of you. Looks like Duncan Insurance is trying to add some parking to their facility over there, so we'll review that upcoming meeting. And we
Do
just
they
want
wanna add some in the back?
I believe so, yeah. If you look in your minutes here, it's in there. They got it drawn.
So,
And then we've been just reviewing the zoning ordinance. Yeah, reviews.
You remember, we need to have a meeting with we need to invite the township planning commission to one of our planning commission meetings.
Okay.
Any
I'll
members that would
tell,
like to.
I'll tell Chrissy.
And she knows it, but just as a reminder.
Yeah, okay.
That covers all the administrative reports. Moving on to general business, our consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes, the payment of the bills, and special event application for autumn days.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
support.
That's
Motion by
it.
Shaw, supported by Belkey. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. You're covered.
Awesome.
You don't have to feel like you have to leave,
Oh,
but your part is covered.
thank you.
Okay, moving on to the thing we've all been waiting for. the auditor's report.
Say it again. Yeah,
All right, Dave, you,
no, that's you, that's you.
you may want to,
Can we scoot over to the edge?
Okay,
Because otherwise that blinds me.
good evening, everyone.
Evening.
I see a lot of familiar faces, but my name is Curtis McBride. I'm a CPA and partner from McBride Manley and Company, and with me this evening is Amy Delia. She's one of our business partners. I am our firm's governmental accounting director, and Amy's actually our audit director. And we were both involved with the audit this year. And we are here to present the results of our audit for March 31st, 2023. In addition to the slides up here, you guys should all have a hard copy handout of my presentation. Before I get into the slides, I first want to briefly talk about the financial statement, which is this bound document that you should also have in front of you. Specifically, the audit opinion. So there are three types of opinions you can receive from your auditor. One of them is what we call a clean or unmodified opinion, which means that we believe the financial statements are accurate and they're in compliance with our professional standards. Then there are two types of opinions that we call modified. One of them is a qualified opinion, which means that for the most part they're in compliance, but there may be a few exceptions. And then the last type of opinion is what we call an adverse opinion, which means we do not believe the financial statements are reliable, they're not in compliance with our standards. So I am pleased to announce that for March 31st, 2023, the village did receive a clean or unmodified opinion from our firm. And just to clarify what that actually means, we don't provide an opinion on the financial health of the village. That's not the primary focus of our audit. We're just simply providing an opinion on whether or not the village financial statements are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles under governmental accounting. Now moving over to the slides, the first fund I want to talk about is the general fund. Now the general fund primarily derives its revenues from property taxes, state shared revenues, and then federal, state, and local grants. Looking at the balance sheet at the end of the year, March 31st, you can see you had about $2,232,000 of total assets on hand. You had total liabilities of just over $650,000, $700,000 at the end of the year, to end the year with an ending fund balance level of about $1,506,000. I'm going to talk about fund balance level in a subsequent slide near the end of my presentation. So just pointing that out. So you did finish the year with an ending fund balance in general of about $1,506,000. In looking at the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for general, so this is the income statement for the year, you can see you generated about $977,000 of total revenues during the year. You can see you spent about $826,000, so you actually had an increase to your fund balance level during the year of about $151,000. And as I mentioned previously, you finished the year with an ending fund balance level of just over $1.5 million in general. In looking at the sources of revenue specifically, comparing 23 to 2022, you can see that total revenues went from $982,000 in 2022 to about $977,000 in 2023. Looking at some of the differences between the 2 years, you can see property taxes did increase slightly from $401,000 in 22 to $407,000 in 23. Now that's not because property tax millages increased, they did not. It's because taxable values throughout the village increased, which generated more revenues. You can see one big difference is state shared revenues. So you generated about $281,000 in 22, and that fell down to about $230,000 in 23. That's because as part of state revenues in 2022, you did receive about $63,000 in an emergency disaster grant from the state. That was for the tornado during the 21-22 fiscal year. So that explains the major difference there. In looking at the pie chart, you can see that kind of really drives the point home that the general fund is primarily supported by property taxes. So that makes up about 42% of your annual revenues. You can see state shared revenues at about 23%. Again, those are the major revenue sources for general. In looking at expenditures by type, staying with general fund here, again comparing 23 to 2022, you can see you spent about $900,000 in general in 2022 and about $826,000 in 2023. Looking at some of the differences here, the largest one is maintenance. You can see you spent about $116,000 for maintenance in 22, but only about $20,000 in 23. And again, that's related to the tornado. So obviously you had a significant amount of maintenance costs in the 21-2 fiscal year as a result of the tornado cleanup. Another major type would be capital outlay. You can see you spent about $126,000 for capital outlay during 2023. That was, you purchased an F-150 during the 22-23 fiscal year, and you also purchased a New Holland backhoe during the 22-23 fiscal year. So those are the major capital outlays for general during the year. And then when you look at the pie chart, you can see that the general fund, its budget is made up of about 56 or 57% of wages and related payroll costs. And that's typical of a municipality the size of the village that has, you know, a police department and DPW department. Obviously, that's labor intensive. So you would expect the majority of the cost to be for wages and payroll related costs. The next three funds I want to talk about briefly are the street funds. Now these are different than general in that these are what we call special revenue funds. We call them special revenue funds because their fund balance levels are restricted for a special purpose, and that's for the maintenance and construction of streets throughout the village. In other words, you can't use these funds for general operating purposes. They must stay with streets. Now major and local street funds, they derive their revenues from the Michigan Department of Transportation. So you actually receive distributions from MDOT to help support major and local streets. The municipal street fund derives its revenues from property taxes. So you have a property tax millage for streets, which runs through the municipal street fund. And looking at the balance sheet, you can see the local street fund had about $46,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. It had about $2,000 of liabilities against those assets to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $44,000. Major Street had about $175,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year, about $27,000 of liabilities against those assets, to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $148,000. Municipal Street had about $682,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year, about $11,000 of liabilities against the assets, to finish the year with an ending fund balance level of about $672,000. I'm going to briefly talk about fund balance here before I get into the discussion at the end. But when you look at fund balance level, you know, a lot of times the recommendations are more in line of, you know, what is the recommended minimum fund balance level in a fund. It doesn't really give you even a range or a percentage, but a lot of times they look at it as a benchmark. Usually is, you know, what is your fund balance level in relation to your annual revenues in the fund? Or what is it in relation to your annual expenditures in the fund? Or how many months worth of expenditures do you have in fund balance? So these are some of the typical benchmarks you'll see with fund balance. But looking at these funds, you can see local had about $44,000 of ending fund balance level. You know, Major Street had about $148,000, and Municipal Street had about $671,000. So if you look at Major Street, for instance, its fund balance level is actually more than, or it's roughly 100% of annual revenues, correct? So if you just look at it in a vacuum and said, well, the fund balance level for Major is 100% of revenues, therefore it's very high. Well, not necessarily, because you have to consider the type of fund it is. So the street funds are very capital intensive funds, correct? So for instance, with Local Street at $43,000 and Major Street at $148,000, how much does it cost to repair or construct a street? It's a lot. So, you know, $148,000, would it do a village block? I'm not sure. with the way costs are in 2023. So you have to consider a lot of different factors when you're looking at fund balance level, not necessarily a percentage of total revenues or expenditures. There are a variety of other factors you must consider, which I'll get into in a little bit later. Municipal Street Fund, that's a great fund to have because not every community has it. So the good news is you have your Municipal Street Fund, which is there, which can help support major local streets. So that's a very good thing for you to have and offers you a lot of flexibility with construction and maintenance of streets throughout the village. I have a couple slides here where I look at trend analysis, beginning with property tax revenues. So this would be the general operating millage as well as the municipal street millage that the village has. Here we're going back to March 31st, 2019. You can see in 2019 you generated about $516,000 of property taxes that year. It went up over $540,000 through 2020 and 2021. And you can see for March 31st, 2023, you generated about $569,000 for property taxes. So you can see a positive or upward trend here for property taxes. Now again, I mentioned this before, this is not because property tax rates are going up, it's because taxable values throughout the village are going up. Now the interesting thing about this is, if I took this all the way back to 2008, in 2008, you generated about $612,000 in property taxes that year. So even though we see a positive upward trend here from 19 to 23, you still had about $43,000 less in property taxes to work with in 2023 than you did back in 2008. We all know the cost of supplies, materials, and everything else to run the village certainly has not gone down since 2008 because we know the cost of living has gone up. So the reason for that is the statutory limitations placed on property taxes in Michigan. You have Proposal A, which limits taxable value growth to individual properties to the lesser of inflation or 5%, and then you have the same limitation under the Headley Amendment. You have the same limitation for the village as a whole. So what happened is in 2009 and 2010, we had a bit of a housing market crisis. So property values declined sharply in a very short period of time. Taxable values went with those. So obviously you generated less property taxes then. And because of those caps on the growth, it's taking a long time to climb out of the hole that you experienced back in 2009 and 2010. In looking at the 5-year historical fund balance trend in general, you can see you finished March 31st, 2019 with about a $726,000 fund balance level. You went through 2021 with about a $1,272,000 fund balance level, and that has gone to about $1,506,000 at the end of March 31st, 2023. So you see an upward fund balance trend here, even though you're still working with less property taxes now than you did back in 2008. The last two funds I want to talk about briefly before we discuss fund balance a little bit more are water and sewer funds. Now, these are different than the general fund and the street funds in that these are what we call enterprise funds. We call them enterprise funds because they're accounted for more like a for-profit private business than a government. And that's because the village owns the water and sewer plants and all of the major assets of the plants, and then it charges the users for using the system. So these are supposed to be self-sustaining funds. And looking at the statement in net position, starting with sewer, you can see the sewer fund had about $7,104,000 of assets on hand at the end of the year. However, you can see an asset category here under non-current assets, fixed assets. So that would be the actual sewer plant itself and all the other major assets related to the plant at about $6.5 million. So you can see that even though sewer has $7.1 million in assets, the majority of it is tied up in the plant itself at 6.5. Those are not liquid assets. So that's not cash, and nor are they assets that can be easily converted into cash. You see a similar relationship here with water fund, right? You see total assets in water of about $3,885,000. However, Over 3.6 million of those assets are tied up in our non-liquid fixed assets at about $3,627,000. So following this all the way down, again going back to sewer, you had $4,258,000 of total liabilities. The majority of that in the form of a bond, which was at $4,120,000 at the end of March 31st, 2023. And that matures in 2040, so that was obviously the major construction project he had for the sewer. Looking at net position, this is the equity position for sewer. You can see your total net position was about $2,846,000. But you can see you have two categories of net position here. You have the net position that's tied up in those non-liquid assets, and that's at about $2,340,000 at the end of 23. Looking at the unrestricted portion, which is the liquid part of the net position, so that's equivalent to fund balance, if you will, was at about $506,000 in sewer. You can see going over to water, you had about $293,000 of total liabilities. $274,000 of that was for the dwarf bond. The good news is that matures in October of 2024. It's coming off your books shortly, so that's a good thing. In looking at the water net position, similar situation here. You have $3,592,000 in ending net position, but again, looking at those two categories, $3,353,000 of that net position is tied up in those non-liquid assets. So that leaves you with an unrestricted portion, or a liquid net position, of about $239,000. Now, similar to the discussion we had with streets, when you look at the unrestricted or the liquid net positions in these two funds, water and sewer funds are also very capital intensive. I would say probably more so than even streets. So when you look at the unrestricted net positions, those are not large unrestricted net positions here in water and sewer. I would say they're kind of on the low side. And looking at water at $239,000, it may need assistance or subsidies from the general fund at a level of $239,000. Now, the good thing is the general fund is the most flexible fund that you have. Generally speaking, the fund balance level in general can be used for most purposes, as long as it is an allowable expenditure for municipalities under law. General fund can help support streets, general fund can help support water and sewer. So having a good fund balance in general does offer you the flexibility to help in those situations.
Could salvage title money be little?
No.
It cannot.
No.
I would certainly defer to Mr. Bohorsky,
You're
but
already saying no.
no, yeah.
Yeah,
But
we're
no.
all shaking
You
our
do have to
head.
be, you do have to be careful with salvage. Now,
Right, I know, I just.
yeah,
Yeah.
the amount of things you can use it for have become more flexible over the last
much
6 or
more.
7 years,
Yeah.
but there's
Okay.
still limitations. I want to talk about general fund balance at the end here. Now, as I mentioned previously, fund balance is generally measured as a percentage of revenues or expenditures. You can go out there and try to find recommendations, and you'll get various answers depending on where you do your research. But the bottom line is, what you need to understand, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to setting your fund balance level and determining whether it's healthy and where it should be. And really, an appropriate fund balance level is a community-by-community decision. There are various factors you must consider when you look at your fund balance level. Number one is budget size. That's an easy one, right? So a lot of times what you'll see is, the Michigan Department of Treasury talks about fund balance level a little bit, and so does the GFOA, which is another organization I belong to. And they usually approach it in the context of what is a recommended minimum level. So I interpret that to mean we don't think the fund balance level should ever get below this level. However, anything beyond that is really a community-by-community decision. Just be aware, if you are below this level, you really need to make sure it doesn't get any lower, and you may have to build it back up. So budget size, where I'm going with this is, let's use fund balance level of 10% of annual revenues, for instance. Now, for a large municipality, like maybe the city of Detroit or the city of Grand Rapids, maybe that would be a sufficient fund balance level in general, because of the size of it. However, for the village of Armada, 10% would leave you with an ending fund balance level of under $100,000 in general. So that would be very low, and that really doesn't, provide you with a lot of flexibility there and offer you much of a cushion in the event of major unanticipated expenditures that you may have. The next two are kind of related: future planned expenditures and long-term forecasting. So, do you have a long-term forecasting plan? Do you have a capital improvement plan? I would say it would be considered best practices to have a capital improvement plan. I typically see these run anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So what's on your long-term forecasting? What's on your capital improvement plan? The health of other funds. We talked about this a little bit, right? So you can't just look at the general fund on its own, due to the fact that the general fund is flexible, has some flexibility. If you have other funds that are struggling, that are capital intensive, for instance, like maybe the street funds or the water and sewer fund, you want to consider that when you look at your general fund balance level. Is my general fund going to have to help subsidize some of these other funds that don't have large fund balance levels? Then, of course, the governing body philosophy. I know that I think this is my 22nd year, I think, coming to the meeting, but I know that typically, even though maybe it's not documented, I know philosophically you've been relatively conservative and have taken the approach that we want to have a solid fund balance level in general, because we want the kind of flexibility it provides in the event that we have future unanticipated expenditures, or we may need to help subsidize other funds. To put all this into perspective, the one piece of information that we do have out there is in 2019, the state of Michigan actually performed a fund balance study. So this was for all municipalities for the year ending 2019. And they actually put them all into buckets. They looked at all cities, they looked at townships and villages. And so what they found was that the median fund balance ratio for villages, at least at March 2019, was 81%. So what that means is the median was that their fund balance levels were 81% of annual revenues. Now, if we go back in time to 2019, the village finished March 31st, 2019 with a fund balance level of 80.7%. So you were pretty darn close to the median fund balance level in 2019. Now, there has not been a study done subsequent to that by the Michigan Department of Treasury. I will say that your fund balance level has grown since 2019. It was 81% in 2019. It's currently, as you can see in the bullet point above that, it's actually at 154% at March 31, 2023. Without getting into specifics, because again, it really is philosophy, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but I do, in my opinion, we do have some recommendations. You probably should have discussions about potential unexpected events or planned expenditures in the next 5 years. Consider preparing a long-term forecast and a capital improvement plan, right? In my experience, a lot of communities have capital improvement plans. Now, the thing to remember about a capital improvement plan is when you create one, you're not stuck to it. It's supposed to be a living, working document. So, you create it now, and maybe it's 5, 10 years, and maybe 3 years down the road, you look at it and say, we really need to modify a few things on this. And, when you have a capital improvement plan, you may look at something over the next 10 years and say, wow, these total capital improvements over the next 10 years, and again, I'm throwing a hypothetical number out, it's $6 million. Well, we don't have $6 million in fund balance right now. That doesn't mean you're going to spend that $6 million in 1 year, right? So it's just prioritizing, capital improvements that might come up. And then, if you have a goal, it's, okay, are we going to have enough of a fund balance, to fund some of these? And then, of course, you prioritize your capital improvements, right? Not all capital improvements are going to have the same priorities. And consider establishing a fund balance policy. Again, I would be very careful to not have a rigid one. I would look at it more like the Michigan Department of Treasury looks at it and have and look at it as what is our minimum fund balance level policy. And of course, you can be over that minimum level. What it does is at least establishes an internal policy to look at and say, okay, we want to make sure our general fund balance never gets lower than, let's say, 25 or 30% of annual revenues. Again, it can be anything that you choose. I just use that as an example. And of course, being the source of my information, I did get a rate from the Michigan Department of Treasury. They do have really good material out there, and I think I even shared some with you, Ann.
You did, yes.
So that's really the source of the majority of the information here with fund balance levels.
Do they have templates for all this type of,
I don't know if I'd say templates, just a lot of presentations.
okay.
For years, we've had, I had it with Joe and I used to discuss it, and Ann and I have. But like you say, the fund balance being 154% of revenues. But when I looked at what I thought, what I'm trying to establish in my own mind, not as a council, but I did this when I was a commissioner, that I would do it as a percentage of our expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if we're gonna spend $900,000 a year, say, that's what we got budgeted. I had I always felt I wanted to have a certain percentage of that covered in our fund balance.
Right. And the reason I use revenues is because for whatever reason, the Michigan Department of Treasury has now transitioned to looking at it as a percentage of revenues instead of expenditures.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. But if you look at as a percentage of expenditures, it's actually more than 154%.
Yeah.
So
But it hasn't always been there at all.
that's correct.
The salvage title and the use of that money, the flexibility that's happened has helped us a lot.
That's correct. And if you do set a benchmark, again, you can use it you can set it as a percentage of expenditures or as a percentage of revenues. Another way to look at it is, a lot of people look at it as how many months of expenditures do I have
Yeah,
in fund
That's
balance.
the
You
way I
can
look
do that
at
too,
Yeah.
right?
Also, again, like we used to have sometimes a little different name for this. Rainy day fund.
Sure.
So that, we may be going into some extra expenses now with losing an employee and things.
Oh, the
So we
tornado
want to make
fund.
sure we have it or run like the tornado came up. So anyhow,
Or the market crashes.
that's all.
We're taking over the DDA debt.
Yes,
Yeah.
that
That's a
was
big one.
big. I
Yeah,
don't know what,
taking
Yes.
over the
10, 11
DDA
years
debt,
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
loaning money to other departments, which is much better than having to raise taxes on people.
Well, I would just say though, my discussions with Curtis, he says that is a good use of unrestricted funds, general funds, but the point is, we should pay it back. So
Right,
my-
agreeable.
The
Totally
loan I
agree.
got from general to pay off the media,
At a later date.
at a later date, we actually got the work done in advance of paying it off, is a good move now, so this next year will be.
Absolutely good
And-
move.
I don't mind if I can interrupt, and certainly Jeff chime in. My only thing, like talking about shifting monies from general to other funds, is perfectly fine, right? However, as a council, I'd make it very clear when you're doing this of what your intention is. Is this, am I transferring $100,000 from general to water, or am I loaning $100,000? So my
We
advice
have
to you
made
is-
that clear,
Yeah.
always, that it's a loan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would just make sure it's documented in the minutes that.
That's the motion.
Right, you got it.
Yeah, to loan the money.
I think fundamentally though, I have a question for you, because there's really two things. One, be it roads or water and sewer. I mean, what I'm hearing, there's two real issues there. One is the fund balances need to be more robust. So if you're gonna use your general fund, I think what Curtis is trying to say is a loan's probably not the way you're gonna build those funds up.
Correct, because a
Yeah.
loan does not increase fund balance.
Right, so I think that that's one issue that going into this next budget, you're gonna have to look at. Because at the current fund balances, you will not be able to meet the demands of an unexpected or unplanned thing. So that's issue number one.
Yeah.
You have to tackle, how do we build that fund balance? Then the other issue is then, and that was the point of planning, long-range planning. Your second challenge is then how do you, because you're not going to be able to use that fund balance necessarily to fund certain projects, right? You could, but theoretically, you have to have sufficient revenues in those accounts
Correct.
to tackle the project.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, if you gave money from the, I won't use the word loan, you allocated funding to boost those fund balances, and you use that up for projects, you're still gonna have Curtis a year from now saying, you don't have enough in your
Yeah.
fund balance.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think you
Yeah, we
gotta,
may have that, you know.
yeah, but I'm just saying, it's kinda, to me, like a two-prong analysis. One is to get the fund balances healthy, so then, to use your term, a rainy day comes, you're covered in water, sewer, or roads. And then secondarily, how do you meet the demands of long-term projects? Which I know you two guys wrestle with a lot. Chris
Well,
too.
Yeah.
One of the problems, as you know, with that, we would have had a lot of those things, and we would have had better fund balances. However, the government sometimes decides to do things
Right.
that,
We have no
you
control
know,
over it.
we have no,
No control.
you know, like the arsenic treatment.
Right.
That came out of nowhere, kinda, to all these places, you know. Heck, we've been drinking that arsenic I was drinking it for about 60 years before we put that thing in. And all the people outside of the village are still
still
drinking
doing
that
it, yeah.
arsenic, and nobody cares about them.
Right.
But they care about us.
Yeah, so you have new requirements that you must
So
comply with.
I'm telling you, they put those kind of requirements in, and that's what shoots, in this case, hurt our really water fund budget. If we wouldn't have had that, it would have been a different
Yeah.
story.
I would just make a comment, though, that the work that Steve has done and that I've done over the last 4 years to get the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant and all of its related facilities up to snuff is, we've done a lot. And so those facilities now, all of those facilities are in great shape. The biggest issue, of course, that we're dealing with now is the underground infrastructure for him and I, which is that capital improvement plan, infrastructure capital improvement plan that we've been talking about.
Let's let Curtis go on. Go ahead.
Ann had a question.
I did, Curtis.
Yes.
And you've kind of touched on it a little bit. And you had said the purpose of a general fund, keeping it healthy, is so you can help those other areas when they need help. And I know that since I've been here, I know there was a loan to sewer, there's been a loan to water. And when I hear the word loan, I expect payment back.
Sure.
But and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, they've loaned money or given money to areas in the past, but never got payment back. Is that correct?
Not never, but there has been things like way back, general loan water, a huge amount of money. And water paid back when it could, a little bit here, a little bit there, nothing regular. And at some point, council forgave the loan.
Yeah. So,
Helps
for
us
giving
change.
loans in the past, can we still go forward saying, okay, we're gonna make these payments back to the general fund?
Sure we can.
And
Yeah,
We
I mean,
make those
again, I would
decisions
just
as
caution you.
needed.
Yeah, I would just caution you, moving forward, when money is moved between the funds, that it's very detailed. What the purpose of
Right.
of shifting the money, is it an actual loan, is it a transfer, and do we expect repayment? You know, I would just make sure that's documented very, very well.
Also future councils, I mean, councils change,
Right.
Absolutely.
you know?
Right.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for all your work.
Yeah, Anything else?
As usual.
Just
it's
that I would
like-
say that, again, some of the, whenever we establish what the minimum unrestricted fund balance is gonna be, again, it's philosophical, whatever we establish it as, the money that is over and above that also affords the village an opportunity to, well, that's the word I wanted to use, to take advantage of opportunities that come up that we may not be able to deal with because we're artificially holding money back. So
That's why we were able to take advantage of that good opportunity you gave us with that media.
I thought we did a good job. I'm just saying though,
right.
as we put a capital improvement plan together, again, a lot of it's gonna be DPW stuff, so, salt dome, DPW barn, vehicles and that kind of stuff. That's what I would expect to be generally on that, capital improvement plan list. Maintenance for the building here, air conditioning and.
We're getting away from what we're.
New police
I wanna make sure that I understand it properly, that's where that money can support.
These are council decisions.
I got it.
Anything else, Chris?
I don't have anything else.
Thank you.
Do you have anything for us?
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Even though we don't always like seeing you, it's always a pleasure to see you.
I always like
I didn't know how to take
seeing.
that.
No, you guys do such a fantastic job,
Thank you.
and we've always been very, very happy with your performance. Okay, do we have a motion or
Yes.
something to accept
Yes.
the auditor's report?
It's written out, so somebody read it, please.
Oh. Michael, you got that there?
Let me see. Be resolved to accept the audit for fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023, and to place on file.
Support.
And also be it resolved.
No,
No,
we don't have that, that one,
Oh.
that one's, we didn't have that.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
motion by Shaw, supported
Yep.
by Sleds.
Yep.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion's approved. So,
Next thing's negotiations.
so we can move on. Setting the negotiation committee.
That's your, it's
Okay.
under me, but it's you.
March 31st, our contract expires, is that
All the
correct?
contracts, every contract expires. So,
Which
all the
would,
contracts.
just to, that would be the police chief, that would be the
Officer, the
DPW superintendent,
DPWs, all the DPWs.
the full-time officers, which in this case is Andrew,
Yeah,
and the DPW guys.
and Becky.
And also our
Okay.
clerical.
Yep.
Well,
Becky.
with
Clerk.
is Becky
She is,
in it?
yes.
Okay, Becky.
Yep.
So, I'd like to appoint a committee, and our hopes is to have this pretty well put together by Christmas. And the people I recommend to be on this committee is Joe Adair, Mike Shaw, and Ann Porter. And they graciously agreed to accept that position and to get working on that. And we need a motion on that?
Yeah, so it's trustees, Adair, Shaw, and then treasurer Porter at the end, please.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to appoint trustee Adair and Shaw and treasurer Porter to the negotiating committee for the employee agreement.
Support.
Okay, motion by Delkey, supported by Clark. All in favor of the, Biden?
I supported it.
Yeah, he said Clark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Let me turn these on.
supported by Clark. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion's approved.
Do we traditionally have a set amount depending on inflation, or how do we determine the employees?
That's up to you guys to discuss.
Something to
Decide.
discuss. make recommendations to
Make
the council.
recommendations to council.
You know, and even after you do that, then we'll discuss it and
Right.
see where we all go.
Joe's been
So-
through it,
Good.
yeah, so.
Dave, just to make sure I'm clear, you want the going in position, or you want them to have negotiated with the employees?
We want them to negotiate with the
Okay.
employees.
The current employees right now.
But
Yeah.
any, even if you two, if the committee and the employees agree, it's still gonna be approved by the council.
Yeah, it gets approved,
Yeah,
at the
I
end
mean,
of
the
March.
next
Yeah.
person we bring in for DPW, that will be a whole other negotiation
Yeah,
at the time of hire.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I'm just trying to
yep,
Yeah.
just get the ones that we have.
make sure I'm still.
We hope to have some new ones pretty quick.
A blank position, when they hire in under the terms of this contract, because we're gonna have them.
Well, just
Well,
tell
they're
them.
under a probationary period,
Probationary.
yeah.
But,
Well, you could put it as an addendum on,
Yeah.
as long as they meet the requirements in the 90 days, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so that next
have
year,
it set.
when their hiring date.
So
Well,
maybe
we'll
at the
go
same
close,
time.
that maybe
They don't
we
think
can-
I'm out.
well, you could extend theirs like 3 months and still, because the whole purpose of this was to get everybody
So
at
it's not
once.
overlapping.
Because it was every year and we were doing different employees and it just got a lot
Yeah.
to do,
Right.
so,
And again, the length of the contract also.
right.
Hope-
I mean, there might be
hopefully
some that only take a year contract.
It
which
would be nice
this
to have
time
a
we don't know.
3-year contract, but,
Right, so,
there's some flexibility in
yeah,
there. So, with that being said, now, we got some upcoming agenda items. Like, the next meeting, we're not gonna have the,
no SEMCOG.
no, something.
That's okay.
So, okay, and of course, any other, you could always get a hold of Michelle to add things to the agenda. What, the Wednesday before the meeting?
Yep,
By the
by
Wednesday
noon.
before the meeting. If you violate that, you may not get it on the agenda. Are there any
I don't think
citizens'
we
comments?
Michelle,
Well-
did we vote on that motion?
Oh, yes, we did.
yes,
All right,
yep,
just want to
Oh,
make
the
sure.
committee, yeah.
yeah.
Where were you?
I didn't, you guys kept talking and Joe asked the question. Normally we.
This is
a
why Joe's
discussion-
here.
Normally the discussion ends before we voted. I think it was kind of like an extra question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yep,
it
we
in
did
the-
vote on it. Yeah, okay, and, are there any council comments?
Just again, Donna, Curtis, thank you, you and your team, especially appreciate you touching on some of those items I was concerned about.
That's one of the great things about that team,
Yeah,
is they've always made things clear.
Yeah.
They've always made sure we understood what we were doing with our funds and what our requests and our demands mean to the reaction of that fund.
yep.
Yeah.
So,
Yep,
No, it's amazing.
always
very
appreciated.
pleased.
I'd like to thank the community of Armada for the Tootsie Roll Drive. They always seem to be very generous, and I think we did very well considering how much help we have, which isn't very much. But,
Good. And I'd like to make a comment. As everybody knows, Victor Curtis is moving on to hopefully bigger and better things. He's been a very, very good employee. We really hate to lose him, but we really wish him the best of luck.
Yeah.
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 And so, like to thank him for his hard work and dedication while he's been here. Any community events?
Autumn in Armada is this weekend, that's what you guys
Yep.
approved.
And that's gonna be, what, just Saturday?
The 14th.
What?
Just on the 14th.
Just the 14th? There's gonna be vendors on the sidewalk. There's gonna be,
Car show.
car show at the administrative building for the school
Yep.
on Birch Street here. So it should be a really nice event. So, okay, no closed sessions. Could I have a motion?
It's 7:59 in case anybody's
Oh.
wondering. Is that clock's on? All right, so Joe?
Yeah.
Motion by Adair, supported by
Shaw.
Shaw. All approved?
Aye.
Motion's approved. Okay.
So I got a question on this community.